Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the entry of the clergy.
Please be seated. We are gathered this morning to honour the memory of one of the truly inspirational figures of our age, Eddie Jaku OAM, a man who made a remarkable impact, whose passing provoked an extraordinary response, and whose legacy will be immense. I want to welcome his family, his wife Flor, sons Michael and Andre, daughters-in-law Linda and Eva, grandchildren Mark, Philip, Carly and Danielle, their spouses, and Eddie's great-grandchildren. I want to acknowledge Commander Michael Nipares, Honorary Aide-de-Camp, representing the Governor-General of Australia, Her Excellency the Honourable Margaret Beasley, Governor of New South Wales, the Honourable Dominic Perrottet, Premier of New South Wales, the Honourable Josh Frydenberg, Treasurer of Australia, representing the Prime Minister, members of the New South Wales Cabinet, federal and state parliamentarians, representatives from local councils and the diplomatic corps, leaders of the Jewish community, distinguished guests, survivors, ladies and gentlemen. I now invite Mr. Alan Murray, the chairperson of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, to welcome us to country.
Good morning, how are you? I want to say a few words. It's important to say this, is that when you come to this land, you understand that there were, and still currently, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who live off this land, but also survivors as well. So we have survivors too, and we continue to live on this great land called Australia. I want to acknowledge all First Nations people around the world that are here today. I want to acknowledge you, and also want to acknowledge the family as well. So on behalf of our rights, the custodian rights here in Sydney, welcome to Gadigal land, Aboriginal land. Like your father, grandfather, he's had a great life. He will pass through our laws, and he will have a passage right to our lands. So on behalf of the Metropolitan Local Land Council and its members, welcome to Gadigal land. I normally say this out of welcome to country: don't be strangers, be friends. And if you be friends, we understand each other. With that, I know the occasion's going to be sombre, but it will be good. It's the right tone to make sure that we respect someone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. I now invite those who are able to do so to stand for the Australian National Anthem, to be sung by the Great Synagogue Choir. Please be seated. I would like to invite the Honourable Dominic Perrottet, Premier of New South Wales, to speak.
Well, let me begin by thanking every one of you who are here today to remember Eddie Jaku, a great Australian and someone we all knew as the happiest man alive. It is a great privilege to be asked to speak at this memorial service today. I acknowledge especially Eddie's wife of 75 years, Flor, his eldest son Michael, here with his wife Linda, Eddie's son Andre and his wife Eva, Eddie's grandchildren Danielle, Mark, Philip and Carly, and 5 great-grandchildren too. On behalf of the New South Wales Government, in fact on behalf of everyone in New South Wales, please accept my deepest condolences on the loss of a beloved husband, father, grandfather and friend. A few years ago, Eddie gave a talk in Sydney, and he recounted that the birth of his son Michael was a starting point for a new legacy, an event that, quote, healed his hurt and returned his happiness in abundance. From that moment, Eddie's happiness expanded along with his family. And like a pair of wide open arms, this man's joy welcomed and warmed so many people whom he encountered. When I met Eddie earlier this year, I counted myself to be very fortunate. It is not often in life that we can say that we've met someone truly inspirational. But I can think of no better word to describe a man like Eddie. A man who endured great pain and terror, and yet had such a zest for life. A man who came face to face with the worst of humanity, but departed this life, surrounded by the loving faces of cherished friends and family. A man who would have been entitled to look back with bitterness and anger, but whose legacy of remembrance is instead built on hope. It has been said that hope is the only thing in the world that is stronger than fear. Having seen the hope and happiness that shone from Eddie, I'm inclined to agree. Eddie knew a greater fear than most of us have ever felt or would ever feel. He feared for his life, for his family, for the country that he once loved so much. It must have been overwhelming, insurmountable, and impossible. But hope won. Eddie's hope. Hope that if he could just survive just one more day, that things would change. Hope that no matter how bad things were, this was not the whole story of humanity. Hope that after darkness, there will at last be the light of a new day. It is one thing to entertain all these grand ideas in the mind, but it is something completely different to put them into practice each and every day, in the big things and in the small. But that is the story of Eddie's life. He turned suffering into strength. He used that strength to become one of the most compassionate and generous people that I've ever had the pleasure of meeting. He made a family and home with Flor. He worked hard at everything he did. He left a mark on our great city, giving us the Sydney Jewish Museum. And he loved humanity and gave us his story to share, to put right the wrongs of the past. Eddie was able to do all these remarkable things because he knew that to really live is to live now, today. And today, we feel the darkness of Eddie's absence. But we are uplifted by Eddie's hope for the light that follows. And we are charged, each of us here, to pick up his mantle and continue what he has begun. As I said in State Parliament, when Eddie chose Australia for his home after surviving the Holocaust, our nation gained a remarkable individual as one of its own. And what a gift his life has been to our city, to our state, and to our nation. In that TED Talk a few years ago, Eddie concluded with this: "I pray you always have lots of love to share, lots of good health to spare, and lots of good friends who care." Eddie prayed with steadfast faith in God's goodness. And here, in the presence of family and friends, we can know that his prayers were answered. Here we find lots of love, good health, and good friends. So today, together we also pray, giving thanks for Eddie, for his remarkable life and his wonderful legacy. And we pray that in the face of life's challenges, we may honour that legacy in our own lives, healing hurt where we find it and sharing happiness in abundance. Thank you.
Thank you, Premier. The choir will now sing Psalm 121 in Hebrew. I'd like to invite Mr Michael Jaku, son of Eddie Jaku, to give a tribute to his father.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to acknowledge that today we gather on the traditional lands of the Gadigal clan of the Eora Nation and pay my respects to their elders past and present. Although many have been COVID spooked into staying away this morning, on behalf of my mother Flore, my brother Andre and myself, thanks for making the effort to be here, honouring the memory of my father Eddie Jaku, and indeed honouring the entire Jaku family. Thanks in particular to the Premier, Mr Dominic Perrottet, and the State Government for offering our family this singular honour. Our first instinct was to politely decline, but on further reflection, and despite the surrealism to us of the occasion and the lead up to it, we felt that Eddie would have loved all of this. Centre of attention and in the limelight. His favourite place to be. And with all the pomp and circumstance to boot. In the 18 months prior to his passing, due largely to COVID restrictions, Dad missed out on so many of those things he enjoyed most. his 100-year birthday celebration, the launching of his book, public speaking engagements, book signings, and so on. He was so confident of his continuing longevity that he had planned the venue and guest list for his 100th well in advance, and had even issued verbal invitations. After retaining his unrestricted driver's licence at age 100, he was proud to announce that having been offered a 1-year or 3-year licence, he opted for the 3-year. What more can I tell you about my father, Eddie? Which isn't already widely known from his many public speaking engagements near and far, media appearances, his TED Talk, and his book. Dad was a charismatic individual with a very positive outlook, despite the trials he endured during the early part of his life. We, his family, are quite incredulous at the profound impact, in some cases life-changing, which he apparently had on so many all over the world, as evidenced by the many hundreds of letters, emails, and messages he received over the years, and we continue to receive since his passing. For those closest to him, my mother, Andre, and I, who experienced daily interaction with him, Eddie was not without his foibles. But this is not the place to elaborate on these for fear of minimising his well-deserved reputation, even in the slightest way. I will confess that on more than one occasion when Eddie had cornered a willing listener and was expounding at length about his wartime experiences, we felt it necessary to come to the rescue and extricate that polite individual. My father was not always the confident public speaker he became in his later years. At my own bar mitzvah, some 60 years ago, he could barely put 2 words together in his strongly Germanic accented English, quite embarrassing for an impressionable teenager only too aware of the Anglo-centric milieu in which we found ourselves. In reminiscing about Eddie, it would be wrong to not at least briefly mention my mother, Flore, Eddie's wife of 75 years, who was instrumental in making Dad the man he was and the man he became. She was born Flore Molcho in Thessaloniki, Greece, in 1923. She met Eddie immediately after the war in Brussels, Belgium. They were married in 1946 and migrated to Australia in 1950 with me in tow. Mum was not only Eddie's life partner, but was an active and equal participant in every endeavour which they undertook. Together they built a successful service station business where Dad took care of vehicle repairs and Mum kept the accounts and manned the front office. In their subsequent real estate agency, Mum again kept the books and handled the computer, while Dad did his thing selling and renting properties. I don't doubt that there are some here today who will have fond memories of being sold or rented their first home by Eddie and Flore, who cared for property owners and tenants equally. When Eddie was for many years the treasurer of the Australian Association of Jewish Holocaust Survivors and presented the financial report at the AGM, it was Mum who had kept the accounts all year and prepared that report. Although Dad became an accomplished and popular public speaker, it was Mum who wrote his earliest speeches for him. So I think you get the picture. I'll end by saying that Andre and I are proud to call Eddie our dad. And just like those many all over the world who were touched by him, we miss him.
Thank you, Michael, for those beautiful words. The choir will now sing scriptural verses recited at memorial services. We will now hear from two of Eddie's grandchildren, Danielle Jaku Greenfield and Mark Jaku.
We begin by acknowledging the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of the land upon which the Town Hall stands. We pay respect to their elders past, present and emerging. Indeed, it is on this land where our grandfather first shared the stories from his past. It was this land too that helped to heal our grandfather Eddie and allowed him and his young family a new and happy life following much trauma through the Holocaust, as he has already shared with the world through his book, his TEDx talk, the Sydney Jewish Museum, and to anyone, school and organisation who was interested in his story and positive messages. We may not speak as eloquently as he did, but we stand before you as two of Eddie's 4 grandchildren, Carly, Philip, Mark and myself, not to share his life story with you again, but to thank you for your support. Thank you to everyone who has reached out to all of us, from politicians to journalists, old and new friends, and strangers whose lives he has touched. It is so heartwarming for us to be told again and again how he has impacted people's lives in a positive and unforgettable way. Our Pepe has been described as a national treasure, a life force, everyone's best friend. He described himself as the happiest man on earth. He had wonderful, positive energy, and he put it to good use. The day he passed away, on the 12th of October, a Tuesday, news spread across the world before we had a chance to notify overseas family of his passing. The far-reaching effects were unbelievable. Pepe was a tactile soul who loved connection and genuinely wanted to bring out the love in everybody. That is a characteristic that comes from years of being vulnerable. His best revenge for the trauma of his past was to enjoy life to the fullest. His mantra was to be happy for the rest of his life, after being, as he would say, at the bottom of the pit. He was grateful for being alive. To the world, he seemed strong, and he would offer his opinion with conviction on any number of subjects when asked for it, mostly with messages about making good decisions for yourself and your loved ones, and above all, to be kind. But his strong will to live also meant he had become conditioned to fear death. In his final weeks, he showed his more vulnerable side to his wife Fleur, our Nana, and to our father Michael and Uncle Andre. To the last day, he was still trying to action change to improve his quality of life. Because of COVID and lockdown, we had been unable to see our grandparents in person at their aged care home for 4 months, despite living 15 minutes away, and we're looking forward to finally seeing them that very week. After he pulled through risky heart procedures in July this year, we were sure we would be able to see him again. I went to bed the night before with my very last thought being that I would text him first thing in the morning to arrange a time to visit. We were not expecting to be standing at his funeral that week instead. It's been about 8 weeks now, and after being inundated with overwhelming well-wishing from all over the world, it finally sunk in not that long ago that I wouldn't be visiting Pepe anymore. I miss his uncomplicatedness and gentle, smiling face. Each time I visited, he would show me letters from visitors he'd guided around the museum and students he'd spoken to at schools, readers of all ages who were grateful to him for changing their lives for a multitude of reasons. People shared with him deeply personal stories of how he'd brought them back from a nervous breakdown, inspired fractured families to forgive and reunite after years of no contact, and encouraged teenagers to kiss and hug their mother. He would not want us to be miserable, though. He certainly loved and lost many family members in his life. He would want us to show love, strength, compassion, empathy and respect, and he would definitely have wanted to be with us all here right now. We are celebrating his life. We wish to acknowledge our grandmother Fleur, who supported our grandfather until his passing for over 75 years. Although she is much more private and has always preferred to steer clear of the limelight, Nana has absolutely played a vital role in shaping the Eddie that the world has come to know. Finally, we want you to know, Pepe, that you have taught us tolerance, you have given us perspective, and you have shown us how to appreciate the important things in life.
Like Danielle said, our grandfather Eddie would not want us to be miserable. He had extraordinary mental and physical strength, a survivor of the Shoah who dedicated much of his life to ensuring that the world will remember the Holocaust and that it will never happen again to anyone. His approach was to teach people not to hate, to try to make people happy and to encourage people to find ways to help themselves when life is difficult. As his grandchildren, he was so proud of us, and we could not have been more proud of him. On this truly special occasion that we feel is such an incredible honour, I'd like to quote things that our grandfather Eddie used to say and that I know he will be remembered for. I hope that his words are repeated often in the future, as he would say, to make people happy when they are down, but also because they are important messages to spread. Tomorrow will come, but first enjoy today. It is never too late to be kind, polite, and a loving human being. One flower is my garden. One good friend is my whole world. Alone we are powerless, but together we are strong. Where there is life, there is hope. Hate is a disease. It will kill your enemy, but it will destroy you in the process. Shared sorrow is half sorrow. Shared pleasure is double pleasure. If you are happy and healthy, you are a millionaire. Life is not always happiness. Sometimes there are many hard days, but you must remember that you are lucky to be alive. We are all lucky in this way. Every breath is a gift. Life can be beautiful if you make it beautiful. Happiness is in your hands. And finally, and it was a special moment to hear my grandfather's words come from the Premier just a moment ago. May you always have lots of love to share, lots of good health to spare, and lots of good friends who care. I take some comfort in the thought that our Pepe is with his beloved mother, father, and sister, and his friend Kurt, finally reunited after all these years. He showed us that we all have the power to emit strength with kindness and a smile.
Thank you, Danielle and Mark. We will now hear a tribute from Norman Seligman, the Chief Executive Officer of the Sydney Jewish Museum.
Her Excellency, the Governor of New South Wales, Margaret Beazley, the Honourable Dominic Perrottet, Premier of New South Wales, the Honourable Josh Frydenberg, Treasurer of Australia, Holocaust survivors, Rabbonim, honoured guests, ladies and gentlemen. I too wish to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Gadigal clan of the Eora Nation. I give thanks to their elders and traditional custodians, past and present, who have cared for this land for thousands of years. It is an immense honour, marked with great sadness, to have the opportunity to speak on behalf of the Sydney Jewish Museum as we pay tribute to Holocaust survivor Eddie Jaku, the self-proclaimed happiest man on earth. Eddie was one of the founders of the Sydney Jewish Museum and was passionately involved since its inception in 1992. The museum is reliant on the incredible support we get from over 250 volunteers at the museum. And until Eddie's passing on the 12th of October, we were proud to have 4 generations of the Jaku family simultaneously committed to the museum. Eddie shared his pledge not to hate and his choice to be happy with tens of thousands of people, young and old, including prime ministers, governors, and premiers. He inspired everyone that he met and always talked about the importance of resilience and how one should persevere when things do not go according to plan. Many who met Eddie expressed that it was a life-changing moment for them. I listened to Eddie many, many times when he talked about school groups and school students, and often one-on-one, and each time it was an absolute privilege to be able to do that. Eddie made an indelible impact on both school students and adults, and this impact grew exponentially with the publication of his memoir, The Happiest Man on Earth. We received hundreds of letters after the publication of his book and again on his passing. I will quote from just 2 letters which give an indication of the impression that he made on many, even those who had never ever met him before. Himandi from Melbourne said, "Eddie, I've read many books on the Holocaust, but I believe that your book has been the most enthralling and meaningful I've ever read. I just wanted to say thank you for bringing your story to the world. So many people don't realize how precious life truly is and take it for granted." And Renee said, "The pearls of wisdom that you shared within the pages of your book will stay with me forever. I'm sure that you've heard this before, but you have certainly put my life into perspective." Eddie was always obliging and willing to give of his time. I often asked him if he would talk to groups of people in the museum. And no matter how busy he was, he always took the time to talk to them. Sometimes he told me he only had about 5 minutes, but half an hour later, Eddie was still there, enthralling them with every single word. He had a wonderful sense of humor and an infectious laugh, and made everyone feel that he was their very special friend. Over the past year, we embarked on a very important project at the museum called Dimensions in Testimony. This project involved us filming 6 survivors for a week each, asking them over 1,000 questions. And the objective of this is to create an interactive biography. Eddie was one of those 6, and within the next year, visitors will be able to come to the museum and have an interactive discussion with Eddie as if he was right there in front of them. We already have that in place with one of the other survivors that was filmed, so anytime that you'd like to come to the museum and already get a foretaste of that, you're really welcome to do that. You heard earlier on how Eddie got his driver's license time and again, and even at the age of 100. One of my favorite stories about Eddie relates to when he bought a new car just a couple of years ago, and I congratulated him on that purchase. But he looked at me forlorn and he said to me, "You know, it only has a 5-year warranty." At the museum, we held a special birthday party for our survivors when they turned 90, and annually thereafter. We did celebrate someone else's age at the age when they turned 100, but Eddie at 101 took us into brand new territory, and we are so pleased that we had the opportunity to celebrate that birthday with him at the museum, given that we couldn't celebrate his 100th birthday. We concluded the celebration with the words, "Bis 120. May you live to be 120. I know we often say that, but in Eddie's case, many of us imagined that he was immortal and that he would really get there. In fact, when I first met Eddie, he was a sprightly 82-year-old. And over the past 19 years, I've aged, but he always seemed to grow younger by the day. Only a few days before Eddie passed away, he again asked me when we would reopen because we were unfortunately in lockdown, so that he could come back to the museum and talk to visitors, the thing that he really, really loved the most. Sadly, that day never came. But the beautiful memories of Eddie and the powerful messages that he shared with adoring audiences will live on forever. I wish long life to Flor, Eddie's wife of 75 years, his sons Michael and Andre, their wives Linda and Eva, his grandchildren and great-grandchildren. May his memory be a blessing. Thank you.
I now invite Leslie Berger, the President of the New South Wales Jewish Board of Deputies, to speak to us.
Thank you for joining us today to remember and pay tribute to a great man, a giant of our community and of the world, Eddie Jaku OAM of blessed memory. To the New South Wales Premier, the Honourable Dominic Perrottet MP, distinguished guests, thank you for allowing our community, our state, to honour Eddie today. To the Jaku family, Eddie was a beacon of light, a storyteller, a survivor. In his 101 years, Eddie lived a full life. Having survived the atrocities of the Holocaust, fallen in love with his dear Flor and made a new life for himself in Australia, Eddie made a choice on the birth of his eldest son. He chose to live a life full of happiness, of testimony, of hope for the future. The happiest man on earth, Eddie knew the importance of ensuring the horrors of the Holocaust were never repeated, and how true living testimony from survivors can leave a lasting imprint on us all. Eddie advocated for peace, tolerance, and most importantly, for education. Despite the trauma and nightmares, he endured. He did not hate. And Eddie taught not to hate. As he once said, I speak about life, how precious life is. It's my contribution. I feel that I have to give back to the community. I have to show you what can happen if you are ignorant, if you follow a fanatic. After World War II, Australia took in more Holocaust survivors per capita than anywhere else in the world. While our survivors have aged, and many are no longer with us, the importance of keeping their memories alive never dims. Survivors like Eddie embraced Australia, playing their part, no matter how large or small it was. Restarting their lives upon arrival here in 1950, Eddie built up a successful career, a strong and loving family, and stood as a part of the foundation of the Sydney Jewish community. Eddie and his family have dedicated themselves to our community, supporting and volunteering through many organisations, including the New South Wales Jewish Board of Deputies and the vital work we do. Remembering the kindness of strangers and his experience as a refugee, he recalled that we are all part of a larger society, and our work is our contribution to a free and safe life for all. Eddie knew the impact his efforts would and could have, how his efforts could affect those he never met. Eddie may have been a member of our New South Wales Jewish community, but people around the world felt they personally knew him too. When you looked at Eddie, you saw family, friendship, and comfort. And who could ever forget his endearing smile? His message of kindness, tolerance, and humanity resonated with so many individuals across the globe, across political and religious lines. Sharing his story with thousands of individuals throughout the years, the strength and magnitude of his impact can clearly be felt here today. What started with local Jewish children at the Sydney Jewish Museum grew to schools, community groups, workplaces, international engagements, and a TEDx talk. Hundreds of thousands of people are now witnesses to Eddie's story of hope, his blueprint for happiness. Eddie was a mensch, and even in his final days during the lockdown, he wanted to continue to support his community by encouraging all of us to get vaccinated and by agreeing to be the keynote speaker at the recent Kristallnacht commemoration. Each time we lose a Holocaust survivor, It is a terrible loss for humanity, and to farewell someone as impactful and who has left such a mark on society such as Eddie is truly devastating. In tribute to Eddie's spirit, I encourage you to continue to look for the miracles. Create the simple acts of kindness with your friends, family, and loved ones. It is now your responsibility to continue his legacy. Eddie was a beloved community member. We do and will continue to miss him. To the Jaku family, Flor, Michael, Andre, your wives, children, grandchildren, thank you for sharing your father with us, with the world. While this has been a difficult loss for us, it can only pale in comparison to what you as a family feel. Eddie was a beacon of light and hope, and will be forever remembered for his constant resilience and the joy that followed him wherever he travelled. May his memory be a blessing. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Today we remember an extraordinary life which culminated in a very extraordinary old age. Eddie Jaku OAM, Avraham Shlomo Ben Yisrael, a man who did so much good in the world through talking, has now fallen silent, and others must talk for him and talk about him. How does one give a eulogy for the happiest man on earth? I think I have to begin by observing that this famous self-description tells us about the true greatness of Eddie Jaku. That a man who has suffered as he did, who continued to grieve for his family and to suffer nightmares from his experiences, could describe himself in those terms is a testimony to his heroic spirit that triumphed and conquered and then inspired. Those who heard his talks and more recently read his book were not just affected, they were often changed forever. He was born in Leipzig in 1920 into a large family. His parents were Isidore and Lena. After his bar mitzvah, he was barred from the local high school as a Jew and was sent to Tuttlingen to study engineering. He lived in an orphanage and graduated in 1938 as the top apprentice toolmaker. On the 9th of November 1938, Eddie travelled back to Leipzig to surprise his parents on their 20th wedding anniversary. He found the house deserted, except for his dachshund Lulu, because his family had gone into hiding. He slept in the house overnight and was woken at 5 a.m. when Nazis broke in, beat him severely, and killed Lulu. That was his Kristallnacht. He was sent to Buchenwald and was imprisoned later in camps in Belgium and France between 1939 and 1941. He escaped and lived in hiding with his family, but they were arrested by Belgian police in 1943 and sent to Auschwitz. They lived for 9 days on a train, surviving on just 2 cups of water a day in severely cold conditions. On arrival at Auschwitz, Josef Mengele was performing the selection. Initially, Eddie tried to join his parents, but was pulled out. They went to the gas chambers, and he was sent to work. He never stopped missing his parents, especially his mother, and would tell his young audiences, "If you have the opportunity today, please go home and tell your mother how much you love her. Do this for your mother, and do it for your new friend Eddie, who cannot tell it to his mother." In Auschwitz, his skills in engineering saved his life, as he was a useful craftsman. He was close to despair, but his close friend Kurt Hirschfeld and the experience of friendship itself kept him going. He endured the forced death march of January 1945 as the Russians were closing in. He escaped, was recaptured, and again put to work. Again he escaped, this time to a cave where he was found by American soldiers in June 1945. He had been surviving by eating slugs and snails. He was emaciated, he was extremely sick. He returned to Belgium, found his sister Henny, and one day, collecting his ration coupons from the Brussels town hall, he fell in love with the woman handing out the papers. That was Flor, and they married in 1946. He said about his wife, "Flor and I were very different people, but that is what made me so enchanted with her. I was very sensible and methodical, and I liked to work with machines and numbers. She loved meeting new people, to listen to music, cook good food, and go to the theatre. When we went to a show together, she would know the works off by heart and could whisper the lines at the same time as the actors. But this is what made us such a good pair. You don't want to fall in love with a reflection of yourself. A strong partnership is with a man or woman who is different from you, who challenges you to try new things, to become a better person." Eddie was not a happy man until the birth of their first son, Michael, in 1948. In 1950, the family came to Australia, and Andre was born in 1952. Eddie made surgical instruments and then reinvented himself as a motor mechanic, and with Flor ran a service station and garage, which they turned into a flourishing business. And then Eddie and Flor worked again together in real estate as a full and equal partnership. In 1972, Eddie began to talk about his experiences. He said, "I feel it is my duty to tell my story. I know if my mother were here, she would say, 'Do it for me. Try to make the world a better place.'" He dedicated himself to telling the story of the Holocaust as he experienced it, tirelessly and with total dedication, often through the Sydney Jewish Museum, which he loved and helped to found. He was devoted to education and inspiring the young. In 2019, his TED Talk made a massive impact, and his book, The Happiest Man on Earth, is now available in over 30 countries and 30 languages. Whatever he wrote and whatever he said was full of wisdom, principle, morality, happiness, and above all, a refusal to hate, or feel jealousy or envy, but rather to embrace friendship and embrace love. Don Isaac Abarbanel, the great Sephardi Torah commentator of the 15th century, says that Ruach HaKodesh, often translated as divine inspiration, is not just prophetic insight. It is also a God-given ability to express a message with great eloquence and beauty. By that measure, Eddie certainly possessed Ruach HaKodesh and was recognized by the state through the award of the OAM and now through this state memorial service. Eddie's Hebrew name was Avram Shlomo. So we think of our ancestor, Abraham, the first Abraham. And as my colleague Rabbi Kaplan observed, our Abraham, Eddie Jaku, like our father Abraham, really came into their own and made their greatest impact in their old age. It was in his 80s, 90s, and even over the age of 100 that Eddie made his extraordinary and indelible contribution. As one of the last adult survivors, he gave immense and incredible service to Holocaust memory, and his efforts only seemed to increase with age. I think the effects of Eddie's life and work will be felt for decades to come. He wrote, "Your efforts today will affect people you will never know. It is your choice whether that effect is positive or negative. You can choose every day, every minute, to act in a way that may uplift a stranger or else drag them down. The choice is easy, and it is yours to make. I'm not sure it's always an easy choice, but Eddie made it look easy, and the whole world was enriched as a result." Messages and condolences have come in from all over the world and from the leaders of our state and nation. But let's not forget the private man who loved his family so much, and they who loved him. He was an amazing source of support to his children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren in their difficult times. And he was always available to speak at an event whenever he was asked, as many of us did, and he always radiated his famous smile. Eddie, we will continue your mission to defeat darkness by bringing light, to destroy hatred by bringing love. We were privileged to know you, to listen to you, to learn from you. Your memory will always be a blessing, and we will make sure that your teachings are never forgotten. Yehi Zichro Baruch.
My name is Eddie Jaku, and I'm standing in front of you today as a survivor of the Holocaust and a witness of the most tragic times in the history of mankind. On the 10th of November, 1938, 10 Nazis broke in the door of our house, and I swear to you, they bashed me to pieces. I thought, Eddie, this is your last day. Today you're going to die. At the time, none of us understood that Kristallnacht, the night of the broken glass, was only the beginning of the nightmare of much, much worse to come. First of all, 75 years ago, I never thought that I have a wife, children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. And I have all this. I was at the bottom of the pit, so if I can make one miserable person smile, I'm happy. I found out when I was about 14, 15, that everything my father is doing is for me. See? Because he's tough with me. It's a tough environment to live as a Jew in Germany. I am far away. I live under a false name. Don't ring from school. Go 2-3 kilometers, phone cabins. You ring from there. I ring a Jew, and I'm not Jewish. So I liked it, my father, even when he was a very, very tough man. I wasn't as tough as my father. My father was tougher. My greatest happiness comes from my family, my wife, 2 sons, Michael and Andre, my many grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, who all bring so much joy. When I see my children's achievement, they don't even know how much they give me. Family is the most important. They have their own way of thinking, but they belong to you. They are flesh and blood. I did not have a chance to say goodbye to my beloved mother, and I have missed her every day of my life. If you have the opportunity today, please go home and make sure you tell your mom how much you love her. Please do this for your new friend, Eddie. You find certain people who give you that spark that you need to continue. But to have somebody you can hang on, you see, it gives you a feeling that you're not alone. In every aspect of my life, I always have benefit by friendship who gave me a life, gave me hope. I have never lost hope. but I was always helped by friends. And whoever is my friend, they have the best friend they ever wished for. Because for me, this is a lot of pleasure to give. As my father said, there's a lot more pleasure of giving than taking. People die, flowers wilt, iron and steel break, but not our friendship. Yeah, but in German it's better. Menschen sterben, Blumen welken, Eisen und Stahl bricht, aber unsere Freundschaft nicht. Every survivor says we have been saved for purpose, so that you know what can happen if you vote for a dictator. I have the responsibility for 6 million Jews who cannot speak. I am the speaker. I have devoted my life to tell their story and to give the people what can happen if you don't care. A country is only as strong as its people. We belong to that country, and we have to teach the people of that country how to behave, because you have a chance to learn from us, survivors, what can happen when they don't care. So we have to stand up. I stand up not only for us, for every human, because of his origin. I get letters from Germany yesterday, from England, and they said, your book and your talks, I wish there would be more Eddies. So what do you want me to do? I call you my new young friends, and I hope when you leave here today, you call me your friend. Life is very hard now. There are a lot of difficulties, there are a lot of sickness, and people get closed up. I want them to open up, be friendly, be kind. Love is a beautiful thing. You see, if you can love somebody, love it with all your heart, because you give me satisfaction to help me when I'm in need, and I have the pleasure to be your friend, to help you when you are in need. Even when all seems hopeless, and when there are no miracles, you make them happen. With a simple act of kindness, you can save another person from despair, and that might just save their life. And this is the greatest miracle of all.
If you are able to do so, please stand for the memorial prayer and remain standing until the departure of the clergy, the family, and the official party. God, full of compassion, who dwells on high, grant perfect rest on the sheltering wings of your divine presence in the exalted places among the holy and pure, who shine as brightly as the heaven's expanse, to Eddie Jaku, Avram Shlomo Ben Yisrael, who has gone to his eternal rest. We pray, Lord of compassion, shelter his soul forevermore under the cover of your wings, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life. The Lord is his inheritance. May he rest in peace. And let us say, Amen.
Kadash Shemei Rabbah, V'yamad Yisvarach Yirutei, V'yamlich Malchutei, V'chayechon U'v'yamechon U'v'chayei B'chol Beit Yisrael, V'agala U'v'zman Karib, V'imru Amen. Yehei Shemei Rabbah Mevorach, V'olam V'olmei Omayah, Yitbarach V'yishtabach, V'yitpo'ar, V'yitromam V'yitnaseh, V'yithadar, V'yithaleh, V'yithalal, Shemei D'Kudsha, Leila Min Kol Birchata, V'shirata, Tushbechata, V'nechamata, V'yamiran, V'yalama, V'yimru, Amen. Yehei Shalom Rabbah, Min Shemaya V'chayim Aleinu, V'al Kol Yisrael, V'yimru, Amen. Oseh Shalom B'imromav, Hu Yaseh Shalom, Aleinu, V'al Kol Yisrael, V'yimru, Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, we ask that you please take your seats until directed by an usher. While seated, we will play a video of the Sydney Children's Choir singing Miracles, composed by Sam Weiss, from words in Eddie's memoir, The Happiest Man on Earth.